Hey everyone, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. I'm hopping on here today to share with y'all a topic that is a little bit more vulnerable, and that is I want to talk to you about the decks and the experiences that I've had with the decks that have made me believe in tarot. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, I think that um, we have all different types of people within the tarot community, and there are people who believed in tarot before picking up a single deck, from the first reading, and there's also people that it took them quite a long time to say, hey, hold up, these cards, I'm not just pulling cards, like I'm actually getting things that match. And, there's a bit of an uncanniness to this. And I think that there are places for the people that are the fast believers and the skeptics within our community. As a matter of fact, I think that it's healthy to have a little bit of skepticism, right? And to question and be curious and to want to know how things work, just like I think it's healthy to also sometimes give in. And so I know for me, I was a pretty quick believer, which you're going to see in just a second, but I want to take you through the decks and the experiences that I had that helped me to believe. So if you would like to join in on this conversation, I would really love to hear your video response and your thoughts, especially since I've only been reading tarot for about 2.5 years at this point. So I know some of you have way more experience than me, and I always find it fascinating to hear what others people have to say. So I'm going to go ahead and call this video Decks That Made Me Believe, and if you would like to join in, feel free to use that hashtag as well. So to go ahead and get started, I'm going to show a deck that has seen a lot of airtime on my channel, but I had to go in order, guys. I wanted to start with the very first experiences that I had with tarot and end with more recent. And so the deck that I want to show that first made me believe in tarot, oh my goodness, that light is atrocious. Let me fix that. Okay, that's a little bit better, is going to be William Blake. So I share this deck a lot on my channel quite often. I think it makes it into pretty much every video at this point, but I think that we have strong relationships with the decks that mean the most to us, and we have strong relationships with the decks that have proven themselves to be very good readers. So when I first started reading tarot, I believe that was in January, I say I believe, I know exactly what day it was. It was January 6th of 2022. And I did instantly feel a bit of like a power surge when I first pulled from it. But for the first few months, I was really just kind of playing around and kind of testing the waters until one day I decided that I was going to do a weekly reading. And I usually used to do weekly readings with a goddess tarot. But that night I was like, no, I need to get William Blake. And I ended up pulling some cards that had suggested to me that a friend that I hadn't talked to in about 2 years was going to come in. And one of the cards looked like my old friend who had at that point exited my life, and then some of the other cards had suggested that he was going to be able to return. And this person showed up completely out of the blue for me. I never expected them to return. I didn't know that they would return, and I literally just sat down for a tarot reading and realized, oh my god, that person in the card looks exactly like this old friend I used to have. And then I also pulled, I set them aside just for this, I also pulled Liberty, which is essentially judgment. You can see someone coming back, almost like they're coming back to life, right? Or moving on to the new life. And then also despair, right? And this woman is still holding on to something from the past. And so from those two cards primarily, I accurately predicted that this person was going to come back into my life. And I think that was the first time that I had a moment with tarot that made me realize, holy shit, this is more than just like a deck of cards. There's truth here and there's power here, and made me feel both humbled by the system and humbled by the experience, but also really grateful that I had this experience and I have like a deck like this to help me navigate life's changes. So this one was the William Blake. All right, the next one is going to be another deck that gets a lot of airtime, but guys, I think the best readers are the ones that we end up gravitating towards, and they become our favorite decks. And so the second deck that made me really truly believe in tarot was Illusori. So when I first moved into my house, this was the first deck that I ever got. It is the only deck that I used to read for my house. And the reason that I read for my house or check in with my house is because of the one time that I used this deck and I got a reading that was so spot on that I nearly choked. I was shocked and I was scared and I was nervous. So we had been seeing some termite swarms. So if you're not familiar, in South Louisiana, there are just like millions of Formosan termites. And they were doing some construction across the street from my house, and it had kicked up a lot of Formosan termites. And it was our first year living in the house. You know, we had just bought it. We're brand new homeowners. We were very nervous, and we had some cracks in our door. And so I decided to read on the house and ask my house. Her name is Cheryl, by the way, if you didn't know that. Cheryl, is everything okay? Do you have termites? Like, what exactly is going on? And sure enough, I pulled for this. Let me go ahead and find the card. I pulled Hermit and I pulled Healing. Okay, so bear with me for a second, because Hermit, I mean, what does that have to do with a house having termites or not? But guys, look at this. Okay, this looks like a termite, like the pattern of this. You have a termite here, termite here, termite here, termite here, and then the Hermit is all about going within. So I instantly knew, hey, we have a problem here. And then to pull King of Cups, Healing with it, okay, hold up, we definitely need to get this sorted. So it did turn out that after that, the exterminator came, and we did have previous termite damage near our doorway from when the previous owners weren't keeping up with the treatments. And so he was able to eradicate it and take care of it. But when you ask a house, hey, do you have termites? And you pull something that looks like termites and looks like healing, and then you find out, hey, hold up. You know, it was an experience that absolutely shook me and scared me and made me realize, like, maybe we should only really mess with the tarot if we want to get the answers from it, right? And so this is why this became my house deck, because I think sometimes we're called to use certain decks for the right reasons. I used to pick my decks every single week just based off the kind of vibe I was trying to create or whatever. I don't do that anymore. I sit down on my tarot card and I meditate for a second, and I ask myself at my tarot table, what deck do I need to read with, right? Because there's not another deck in my collection that has that combination of cards. And I think it's just as important to listen to your intuition about what deck to pick as it is to listen to your intuition about how to interpret the cards. All right, guys, so the third deck that I want to share with you is one that you've definitely seen before. I need to make a video of all the decks that I never show on tarot, because I really bond with my decks, and then y'all end up seeing them, and I appreciate y'all being here, even though I show constantly the same decks. So the one that I'm going to show right now is Terra Botanical, and I want to explain why this deck made me believe in tarot. So when I first started reading tarot, I was in a really bad place. I was homesick. I was away from home, away from family, away from friends. And I needed something to help me navigate that time. And tarot kind of fell into my lap at that point. It was kind of just a really sweet entrance. I knew that I needed it, and I guess that's what happened. But there were a lot of small moments when I first started reading tarot that made me believe. You know, you'd pick a card that matched the day and you were like, okay, I kind of see how this relates. But, you know, when you pick one card and it kind of relates, you know, you ask yourself, is it just confirmation bias? However, there was one point in which I was using this deck that was more profound for me than anything else. And that was when I was in Lisa Pepez's study group for the books. And we were reading Ancestral Tarot, and I decided that I was going to dip my hands into that practice. It was my first time doing any kind of work with anyone beyond the veil. And I asked myself, you know, why don't I just go all in? And so I ended up kind of opening myself up for what was going to come through. And I went to bed that night, and I had a dream, and I kept hearing the words Chloe, 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 Chloe. And I couldn't figure out exactly who that was. So I woke up, and the next day I realized, hey, hold up. You know, I don't know anyone named Chloe, but my brother's ex-girlfriend is Chloe. So I called my brother up and I asked him, hey, is Chloe all right? And he said, you know what, I haven't talked to her in a while, but her sister did just die from an overdose a couple weeks ago, and it was her twin sister. And it really just shook me to the core. So I decided that I was going to pull some cards around it, and I got Queen of Wands, which is traditionally a card that has like black cat in it, and of course the sunflower. And when I went to Chloe's sister's obituary page, all of her flowers from her funeral were there, and they were all sunflowers. And they showed a picture of her two black cats that she left behind that, you know, she always called her children. And so I think from that experience, I had a profound moment with tarot, with kind of mediumship in that way, and as well as too, that made me believe in, hey, what's going on here, you know? So Terra Botanical is always solidified as one of the decks that made me believe in tarot because of that specific moment, but many, many more, many more. Now, the fourth deck I'm going to show was also on my top 10 list. So clearly we have a pattern here, right? That the decks that I bonded with the most are the ones I've had the most experience with. And that deck is going to be Mystical Dreams Tarot. So when I first did a deck interview with this deck, I had asked it, what was our work going to be together? And I got 5 of Cups. And I was like, okay, all right, it's here for the deep times, guys. It's here for the really hard times in my life. And so I used this deck a lot when I was just homesick and I was grieving my home state, my home family, the school I used to work at, the friends I used to have, things like that. And so it helped get me through that particular transition point in my life. But after we had moved back to Louisiana and we were living here for about a year, I felt just this deep sense of melancholia come over me. And when I sat down to my tarot desk, I thought to myself, okay, what deck wants to speak to me today? And Mystical Dreams popped out, even though I hadn't used it for several months. And when I pulled cards from this deck, I realized I had pulled the 5 of Cups, which is funny. It definitely is a card that stalks me from this deck. But I had realized that my melancholia came from a couple of my friends leaving my school. So a couple of my very, very deep, close friends had decided that they were ready to move on and they weren't going to leave the education field, but they wanted to leave the school. And so this deck shook me to my core because there was a feeling inside of me that I couldn't quite describe. I didn't know what was going on. I think I didn't even know how to acknowledge for myself that I was grieving them, even though they hadn't left already. And then this deck just completely called me out on it and showed me that. And there have been other experiences with too that are just a little bit too personal to share, but this is definitely one of the decks that I've had experiences with that just made me believe in that power of tarot. So Tarot Mystical Dreams, it doesn't get enough attention, but it's a reason it's on my top 10 list, and it made it on this one. All right, and the last one I'm going to share, we'll keep this video short and sweet because I want to talk about the more memorable experiences, is going to be the Golden Zar Tarot. So this deck makes me laugh. We have a crazy, crazy, crazy relationship. I talked about how I first got this deck in my Nostalgic Meet You decks, which if you're interested in this sort of like narrative content, I would definitely go check out that video. But let's just say that we had a rough beginning when we first started. And so I decided that I wanted to bond with this deck. It was one that when I had bought, I didn't realize was so loaded with Christian symbolism, and I wasn't quite healed from that part of my spiritual journey yet. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try something new and just see what happens. And so at that time I was reading No Questions Asked. I believe it's by Teresa Reed. And one of the things that she had suggested is that if you want to build your intuitive muscles, you turn over a card and you just feel it. Okay, and so before you look at the front of the card at all, you just turn it over and you touch it and you try to interpret the energy that's coming from that card in particular. And so I decided that I was going to do that exercise. And sure enough, I didn't try to guess the particular card, but the way that I read the energy was absolutely uncanny. So I'm going to look for a couple of the cards that I pulled before I continue my story. So the first one that I sensed the back of and was able to get pretty damn close to the vicinity of was this one. And so essentially I wrote in my journal as I was feeling the back of the card with my left hand. I was writing with my right hand in a stream of consciousness kind of capacity. And I had literally wrote, I just checked my notes yesterday for it, that I had felt like I was in a dim, dark place. And I had felt pressure on my body and a stillness, like sort of just a feeling like I couldn't move, like I was trapped. And then all of a sudden I felt a heartbeat. Okay, so I was listening to the signals that were in my body as I was just reading the back of the card and sensing what was happening. So when I pulled this over and I went from, dim, dark, trapped area, feeling like I can't move my body, to heartbeat, and this is literally Jesus resurrecting Lazarus, I was absolutely flabbergasted. And so I think that there's a culmination of all these moments that made me believe in tarot, but this is the one that made me realize I don't just believe in tarot, I'm a pretty good intuitive reader. And I think that we need to have those experiences and test those experiences and just acknowledge those experiences when they happen. And there's a few other ones, right? Like this one, when I read the back of the card, I felt like a dam was bursting from my womb. And this is, of course, the Ace of Cups. And you can see this water that's flowing. It's not quite from her womb, but it's from a little bit below, right? But it felt like a dam was flowing. And then with this one, when I felt the back of this card, I centered around the back, like right here around the middle. And I felt pain in my elbow. Like I had been resting on it, just like this guy had been. So I know that some people, that might be a little bit woo for you, right? But if you're watching this and you're someone who's willing to get down with the woo, I definitely suggest that you give it a try. And that deck is the one that I found that consistently, if I want to read the backs of it, that's the deck I go to. I actually don't even read with the deck that often. Sometimes I'll just use it to try to like test my intuitive muscle. And I think that practice in itself, bonded and paired with that deck, helps me to really just appreciate the beauty and the majesty that is the tarot system. Guys, there are a lot more on my list, right? But I really just wanted to share the most powerful ones with you, even though, like I said, you've seen most of these decks before, because I think it's important that sometimes we entertain the woo of it, sometimes we entertain the majesty of it, sometimes we sink into it and just really wholeheartedly take an appreciation of what we're doing and how powerful it can be. And so I wanted to go ahead and give you a thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel. And if you want to participate in this discussion, guys, I would absolutely love to hear your responses. So please feel free to do so and hashtag decks that made me believe, or just go ahead and leave in the comments, the decks that made you believe. I think it's important that we build a community together where we have this opportunity to share kind of like the awe that is tarot. So thank y'all so much, and I hope y'all have a wonderful night.